On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 men vanished from America's most infamous prison, Alcatraz. The Rock. Frank Morris and brothers Clarence and John Anglin carried out one of the most daring prison escapes in history. Alcatraz was supposed to be escape-proof. Surrounded by freezing waters and strong currents in San Francisco Bay, it was built to house the most dangerous criminals in America: bank robbers, murderers, and gangsters like Al Capone. But Morris and the Anglin brothers proved that no prison is truly inescapable. Their story is a mixture of cunning, patience, ingenuity, and mystery. To this day, no one knows for certain what happened to them after that night. Did they drown in the icy waters? Or did they succeed in the greatest prison break ever attempted? This is the untold story of the Alcatraz escape. Alcatraz Island sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay. To the untrained eye, it looks beautiful, surrounded by sparkling water. But for prisoners it was a nightmare. The water was icy cold, averaging 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The currents were strong, and the distance to shore was over a mile. The prison was originally a military fort but was converted into a maximum security federal prison in 1934. Its purpose was simple: to house the most troublesome inmates, the ones other prisons couldn't handle. Among its residents were infamous names Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the so-called Birdman of Alcatraz. But Alcatraz wasn't just about punishment. It was about control. Every movement was monitored, every privilege earned. The prison staff and government believed no one could escape. And for years they were right. Many tried, but all either failed or died. That was the legend, until June 1962. Frank Morris was the mastermind. Born into poverty, Morris grew up in foster homes and orphanages. He was highly intelligent, scoring above average on IQ tests, but he also had a long criminal record. By the age of 20, he had been convicted of armed robbery. The Anglin brothers, Clarence and John, were from Georgia. They grew up working on farms, swimming in rivers and lakes. The brothers often swam together for fun, sometimes in cold water. That experience would later prove useful. The 3 met at the Atlanta Penitentiary, where they bonded over their shared desire to escape prison life. Eventually, they were transferred to Alcatraz for repeated escape attempts elsewhere. To the guards, they were just more hardened criminals. But to each other they were potential partners in something bigger. Planning an escape from Alcatraz required patience and creativity. The men spent months carefully preparing. Their cells were located near each other, which allowed them to coordinate in secret. Step 1 was to get out of their cells. Each man had a small ventilation grate at the back. Using crude tools, stolen spoons from the dining hall, sharpened pieces of metal, and even an improvised drill made from a vacuum cleaner motor, they began chipping away at the concrete around the grates. Night after night they worked in secret. To mask the sound, they played music or coughed loudly. To hide their progress, they painted cardboard pieces to look like the wall and placed them over the holes. Behind their cells was a utility corridor, hidden from guards. This became their secret workshop. Here they assembled the materials needed for their escape. One of the most ingenious parts of their plan was how they fooled the guards. The men created lifelike dummy heads to place in their beds during the escape. Using plaster stolen from prison shops, paint from maintenance supplies, and hair from the barber shop, they crafted heads that looked remarkably real. At night, they placed the heads on their pillows, covered with blankets to simulate sleeping bodies. When guards made their rounds, they saw nothing unusual. The men were asleep, while in reality they were working furiously on their escape. Getting out of their cells was only the first step. The real challenge was crossing the bay. For this, the men designed an inflatable raft and life vests made out of more than 50 stolen raincoats. They stitched them together with needle and thread, sealing the seams with heat from steam pipes. They even built wooden paddles to row. The raft was stored in the utility corridor, hidden until the night of the escape. It was an extraordinary feat of resourcefulness. These were not ordinary prisoners. They were engineers of desperation, turning scraps into survival gear. On June 11, 1962, everything was ready. That night, Morris and the Anglin brothers made their move. Each slipped through the holes in their cell walls into the utility corridor. They climbed up plumbing pipes to reach the roof. From there, they crossed the prison yard and climbed two 12-foot fences topped with barbed wire. Finally, they carried their raft to the northeast shore of the island. Under the cover of darkness, they inflated it with a stolen concertina, a type of accordion. Then they set out into the cold, choppy waters of San Francisco Bay. By morning, their cells appeared undisturbed. Guards making their rounds tapped the sleeping figures in the beds, only to discover the plaster heads. The alarm was raised, but the men were gone. Authorities launched an immediate manhunt. The FBI, Coast Guard, and local police scoured the bay and the surrounding area. Within days, they found pieces of the men's makeshift raft and some life vests floating in the water. One life vest washed up on a nearby beach. But there were no bodies, no signs of the escapees themselves. Officially, the FBI concluded that the men drowned in the attempt. The bay's waters were freezing and the currents strong. Swimming over a mile in such conditions seemed impossible, especially at night. But not everyone agreed. For decades, speculation has swirled about whether the men survived. Some believe they drowned. Studies by experts suggested that the currents on the night of the escape would have pulled swimmers out to sea. Without proper gear, hypothermia would set in quickly. But others argue they made it. The Anglin brothers, after all, were strong swimmers. And evidence suggests they may have reached land. In 2013, the FBI received a letter, allegedly written by John Anglin. The letter claimed he had lived in hiding for decades and was now seeking medical treatment. The FBI never confirmed its authenticity. Family members of the Anglin brothers have also reported receiving Christmas cards signed by John and Clarence. Handwriting experts said the writing was consistent with the brothers. Some investigators even believe there's a photograph, taken years later in Brazil, showing the Anglin brothers alive. Whether these claims are true remains uncertain, but they keep the mystery alive. For years, the FBI officially maintained that the escapees drowned. But in 1979, the case was closed with the note that, if they were alive, they would be at least 50 years old and not a threat. The U.S. Marshals Service, however, has never closed its file. To this day, they list Morris and the Anglin brothers as wanted men. Meanwhile, Alcatraz itself was shut down in 1963, just a year after the escape. The prison was too expensive to maintain, and its reputation as escape-proof had been shattered. Today, Alcatraz is a museum, visited by millions of tourists every year. Guides tell the story of the escape, and visitors still peer into the cells once occupied by the men who made history. The Alcatraz escape has become legend. Books, documentaries, and films, most famously Clint Eastwood's Escape from Alcatraz, have immortalized the story. But beyond entertainment, the escape raises deeper questions. Did the men succeed, proving that even the most secure prison can be beaten? Or did they perish, victims of the impossible odds stacked against them? Either way, their courage, ingenuity, and determination have earned them a place in history. The escape from Alcatraz remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. 3 men, armed with nothing more than spoons, raincoats, and raw determination, defied the system and slipped into the night. Whether they drowned in the bay or walked away to freedom, their story continues to capture our imagination. Because sometimes the line between failure and legend is as thin as a raft made of raincoats, and as wide as the waters of San Francisco Bay.